everybody. It's the Scholar here, doing a little late night video, calling it the Pensive Puff. I had the idea watching Scott Adams with his simultaneous sip and how inviting it is. So I was like, well, let's go ahead and do something similar with cigars. It's been a hell of a day for me, so I figured give you guys a little sneak peek of how things unwind in my world, in my mind. So what I wanted to do was pick a special stick, something that I would be excited to smoke, because when you have a bad day, it's not about just smoking whatever. You've got your after school sticks or after work cigars. Then there's the stuff you have with your buddies, but then there's the stuff that's like it's rare, you collect it, and the stuff where it's like you get a little pitter patter, little butterflies and stuff when you smoke it. And these Auroras, I got turned on to these by my buddy Chris up in Canada, who just got married. So Mazel Tov, bro. And he said they're really, really good. So I was at a place called the Briar Shop in Houston, and they had all of the La Auroras, and they all come in these neat little containers here. And normally it's a tube, but these are like little perfectos that come in these little tubes. So they're little, but they come in several varieties. This is the Corojo. So the reason why I wanted to smoke the Corojo for you guys tonight is because the Corojo has a nice, it's on the lighter side, it's not too heavy, it has a nice floral element to it. I call it those high notes, really, really lovely. And they're kind of hard to find. So I wanted to, smoke with you, show you what I thought of it. And they're a little expensive, but not too much. It's like 20 something bucks a stick. But I wanted to kind of show you guys what my thoughts of it were. And to help unwind, I'm pairing it with a Weller Special Reserve. I know a lot of guys like Weller Neat, and it's great neat, but I like a single medium-sized cube, because a little bit of the water opens up the bourbon, and also the cube kind of tells you where to put my fill when I'm pouring it up. Don't go too far beyond the ice. So I like that. For a quality bourbon, you can't do much better than Weller. So we're gonna do a straight cut. A lot of guys do a punch on these little torpedoes because the cap, has that little point on it, so it's a little bit tricky to cut. But I just go ahead and get my little DuPont clicker and just take a little bit off the end. And I've never smoked one of these before. Never ever had an. So you guys are gonna get an unfiltered, unadulterated snapshot. Most of the sticks that we feature on the show, I've smoked them before. That's why they've kind of been chosen, because I want to show you guys certain things. I'm always nervous when I smoke something for the first time, because what if it sucks? I don't want to be in that position where I'm like, okay, here's the stick and it's dog shit. So go out and buy one of those guys. So let's go with the cold pull here. Let's try. See what we got here. Okay, so it's got a little sharpness to it, which is nice. I just had a Rocky Patel 50 yesterday, which is one of the more expensive Rockies, and that has like a really rich fruitiness, like a grapeness to it. This does not have any of that. This is some harsh cedar, not much sweetness, not a whole lot of leatherness. It's got more of a woodiness to it. So interesting. As far as the wrapper is concerned, I don't know how much you can see it, but it's got a really nice color to it. It doesn't really have any. It's got one vein that I can see, but it's got a really pronounced toothiness to it. So that's cool. I don't see a whole lot of crystallization, but there's some. So that's good. All right. And to light it, of course, I'm using my Prometheus special torch because, why not? All right. The good thing about these little torpedoes, or perfectos, however you want to call them, they're really easy to light because you have such a small surface area to get it going. Okay. So we got that lit. One thing I wanted to do in the comments is, if you've had a hell of a day, share it with us, and we'll swap some stories. So I'll tell you a little bit about my week. Well, the first thing is that I find that most people don't really know anything about autism or what people who have it go through, what a day in the life is like. And people, I've noticed that they enjoy hearing my thoughts the way I've had more than one person say, man, I just love the way you think. I love the way you think. I think you're crazy, but I love the way that you think. And so I figured, shit, why don't I just go ahead and spend more time giving the viewers a bit of a snapshot into what it's like. So okay, that's good. That's real good. Wow. Yeah. So far, really like it. It's really, really good. That, ooh, man, that it's got a great mouthfeel to it. It's got a little oily wrapper to it, and leather, real good leather notes. But the highs of the Corojo come in. So, if you've paid attention, one Corojo that we've talked a lot about is the Nestor Miranda Corojo, which is a very fine cigar. I believe it made my top 10 list for 2021. This is quite a bit more expensive, but ooh, wow, this has got some real good richness to it. It's not as harsh as the Nestor. The Nestor, great flavor, but it's a little aggressive. It's not a super refined smoke. So if you are having a palate that's more attuned to your Davidoff style, this is going to be in your wheelhouse. So I would definitely say give it a shot if that's what you like. But I would say one of the best ways to really showcase the difference between how I think and how other people think is if you consider a dot matrix printer. Okay, so if you have one of those, and that's kind of dating myself here, but whatever, everybody knows I'm old. If you look at the printouts, a dot matrix printer is just a series of dots, but they're arranged in the pattern so that when you look at it from far enough away, you can see the overall picture. But if you were to hyperfocus and just look at individual dots, you would just see an individual dot. You wouldn't really see its relationship to the other dots. And so what I find when I watch people is that most people treat reality like it's a dot, or there's a series of dots that have really nothing to do with each other. And so when you talk to them about it, they always act like you're nuts if you see the full picture, because all they see is the dot. And so an example of that would be, what was the most recent one that Dan Crenshaw talked about? There was one where he was talking about wokeism in school and how far it's gotten, and he was like, "Man, I never saw that it would come this far." And that's funny because the way I look at things, I always see how the ideas relate to everything else. And so when I look at anything, I never see it as just a dot. I always see it as like a part of a whole. And so my mind naturally fills in the gaps to see everything idealistically that's related. And so a lot of times I'll end up talking about something and people will be like, that's nuts. My wife, being a neurotypical, doesn't see that kind of stuff at all. And so a lot of times we clash because of the image that I see versus what she sees. So being a holistic thinker, while it's really neat, it has its shortcomings in interacting and, I guess, fitting in with other people. And so one of the things that happened this week, I wrote about it. Man, it went on already. Sure, that thing's quick. That's one of the problems with these stairs. There's such little cherry that it goes out quick. And it's a little windy out here, but I had a case that you hear it and it just kind of chills your blood, because you can't think that kind of stuff would happen in real life. That's just reserved for like movies and CSI episodes. But I had a lady call me because her niece, who is now 15, was raped by her older brother when she was 13 and conceived a child. And so she delivered the child, and I have to terminate all the grown-ups' rights, all the parents' rights, so that the niece can adopt the teenage girl and her daughter as siblings, which is just one of those, like, wow, you forget how insulated you are from that kind of aberrant behavior when you're in like with civilized society, because there are just certain hard parameters in the road of like, you just don't do this, you don't do that. And one of those things is like, don't rape your siblings. And so whenever you see a slice of life where that kind of thing happens, you're just like, no way, no way, then no way that's real. And it is real. And you blows your mind, you know, and it calls, this is really what I wanted to talk about, was evil. Because if you are a follower of religion or a traditionalist in any sense, you know, we use the terms good and evil all the time, but what really does that mean? You know, when I was a kid, we used that a lot, and it was just something I would think about, because to me, the terms good and evil require a standard. You have to have a metric to measure it, to say like, okay, well, I've measured it compared to this, so that means it's good. You know, to just say that this is just abstractly good, it seemed sort of incoherent for me. And when you interact with people that clearly, you know, any reasonable person would be like, that's an evil son of a bitch. It's interesting, the more I get to know how these people operate through my job, the more I realize that what I'm dealing with is not a person who's evil, but a person who's broken. You know, a person who has been so traumatized that their moral compass, if you will, is completely perverted. So that up is down, north is south, right is wrong. So things that they think, you know, they're pursuing good are actually objectively terrible things, but they don't do them because they're objectively terrible. They see it that way. They're absolutely turned around. And so it really makes you wonder, what utility do we have with terms like good and evil? You know, we all use them and we know what they mean, but as far as like on an existential level, what does that really mean? And I've thought a lot about aberrant behavior, and I think everybody's just varying degrees of broken. You know, I remember the first time that I really got a taste of that was my dad, who okay, this is getting like really chocolatey. Wow, chocolatey with those Corojo high notes, lovely, just absolutely delicious. One of the things, so he's a whole episode in and of himself, and I don't know how much we're going to talk about him, but he's an undiagnosed autist, and he was really emotionally abused, probably physically abused growing up. So his internal categories were absolutely totally screwed up, and so there were things that he would do to me as a kid that I think anybody looking at it would be like, that's evil, you know, that's really terrible what he did. But if you come to understand how his mind worked, he wasn't trying to be evil. In his mind, he wasn't being horrible. He was doing what he thought was right, you know. One example, and this is so messed up, and my sister, if she ever sees this, which she won't, she'll be upset, but when she was a toddler, okay, so I hadn't even been born yet, but it was her birthday, and my mom had made her a cake, and as toddlers like to do, you know, they want to taste it before it's been cut. And so she would stick her finger in the icing, and my dad caught her. And my dad, being the kind of guy that he is, it's all about the rules. You know, the rules are the most important thing in the world. And he told her, don't do that again. Well, she didn't really pay any mind to it. She did it again. And then he got upset. See, my day's picking up already. It's amazing what like a really, really great cigar will do for your like overall psychological situation. Can't recommend that enough. Let me find my drink here. So she did it again, and he said, you know, rule was broken. First he asserted the rule. She broke the rule. So then he had to leverage a consequence, because that's how you esteem a rule. So that's where his mind was. Well, he told her, you do that again, I'm gonna shove your face into the cake, okay? Because I guess in his mind that was a proportionate reaction, because she was disrespecting the cake and, you know, disobeying him, even though she was like 2. Well, guess what? She did it again, and then he grabbed the back of her head and smashed her face into the cake, and inadvertently shattered the platter with her face and put a big scar on her nose that's there to this day. Oops. And, you know, when we would talk about that as kids, you know, we kind of joked about it, but it was just like we knew something was off about it. And it'd be easy to think, well, my dad was just an evil guy. But he didn't see it that way. You know, he wasn't trying to be evil. He was just trying to honor the rule, which is that he needed her to not touch the cake. And another thing that he would do, and he told me this repeatedly, he was a very religious man. And he was a big fan of Abraham, you know, because Abraham was of such devout faith. And a story that he liked to tell me was the story of Isaac. And so if you're not, if you didn't have the good fortune to be brought up in the world of religious indoctrination, you may not know all these stories. But Isaac was the son of Abraham, and God told Abraham, hey, well, let me lay a little groundwork. Okay, so Abraham wanted a son, but his wife Sarah was barren, and so like they never had a kid, and he got to be really, really old, like 100 years old, and never had a kid. And God's like, I'm gonna bless you. You're gonna have a kid. And I'm skipping the whole Ishmael thing. So he tells Abraham that he's gonna have this kid, and Abraham's like, no way, God, no way, get out of here. We're too old. You know, look, you see my wife? She's like a prune. There's no way she's having a baby. And God's like, I'm God. You know, so he does his little thing, shoot, 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 and Sarah gets pregnant, and he says, you're going to name the son Isaac. And so Isaac's born, and Abraham couldn't be happier because now he's got that heir that God promised him. And so God, being so proud of himself for having carried out this promise, he tells Abraham, hey, pretty cool, right? Well, here's the deal. I want you to kill that kid. Now that you've gone ahead and got him, I want you to sacrifice him to me. And Abraham's reaction was, sure thing, God. You know, one of the more, I would say, autistic stories in the whole Bible, because I can't think of really anybody outside of a loony bin who would respond to such a command with, you know, affirmative, I'm going to go ahead and kill this kid. Most people would be like, are you sure you're God? Because that's fucked up, you know? But my dad would tell me this story, and then he'd say, and God blessed Abraham for his faith. I'm like, okay. And he said, so, you know, if God were to ever like tell me to kill you, I'd kill you. It was like, but the funny thing was at the time, I was just like, sure. Yeah. I mean, you know, gotta do what you gotta do. God, that's what God wants you to do. And, you know, looking back on it, I'm like, that was a really inhuman thing to say. I think most people would say that was evil, but he thought he was being godly. He thought he was good. You know, and so it's really interesting when you start thinking about the ideas of good and evil, when you strip those labels away and actually try to map out what is their mentality in doing what they do, you realize they're not that different from you. You know, most people, as they do these things, they think they're chasing good. They're just so screwed up that it goes in a really, really weird direction. And you can apply that. Wow. In almost any arena. You know, when you, one of the things that I encountered with the outside world was when I deconverted from Christianity. So my dad raised me to be a Calvinist theologian. When I was in high school, while my contemporaries were trying to get laid, I was reading the Institutes of John Calvin. So that's really paid dividends for me. But so I got to be a very well trained aspirant in the theological arts, studied presuppositional apologetics and the Greg Bahnsen and just, you know, all that nonsense. And the more I learned, the more I just started seeing issues with it. And by the time I was 13, I couldn't get over the fact that, you know, God just seemed like such an asshole. You know, you read the Bible and it's just a series of stories where God is like, all right, I'm going to build this tower of blocks that people are going to like, and I'm just going to smash it. And it just seemed like, man, God, you got some issues, bro. Like, I don't know if you're insecure or what. And then the whole, like, God created the whole universe just for his glory. I was like, you are vain, man. And I understand that from like an ontological and metaphysical perspective, you know, anything God does is right. But it's just like, seems like God is just a projection of the worst traits of a human. And so when I was 13, I was like, I just can't do this anymore. God may be real, heaven may be real, hell may be real, but I just can't in good faith follow a God that seems so barbaric and sadistic. And then by the time I was 15, I had started coming up with my own arguments for the falsification of the God hypothesis. Like I said earlier, I wasn't really doing much with women, so I was just kind of stuck in a room thinking about this stuff. And that's where I first encountered this phenomenon that I'm talking about. And that was where all these contemporaries of mine who were in the church and the school I went to a Christian school, so I just couldn't get away from these religious people. Once I came out as, I'm an atheist, I don't believe this stuff anymore, it was crazy because I stopped being like the guy they knew. I stopped being this good guy. Now all of a sudden I was a God hater, and I was just sinful, and I was evil, and I was only doing what I was doing because I wanted to sin. I just had this heart of rebellion, and it was like, I don't think so, because I was the same guy I was 2 months ago before I came out as atheist, and y'all thought it was cool. But then as soon as I was like, I just can't believe this anymore, they were like, well, you're evil. And that blew my mind, because it was, can you think of any other proposition like, hey, do you believe that, let's say, do you believe in the germ theory? Okay, well, a lot of people haven't been able to prove it themselves. But if you were to find somebody who's like, I don't believe that, I don't think you'd be like, you're evil. We might say you're dumb. We might say you're ignorant. But to just go to this moral quality of like, you're evil, there's something morally wrong with you, that to me seemed really interesting. And I encountered it a lot. And because I'm who I am, I got in everybody's face. I couldn't deal with it. So I was like constantly going to street preachers and making them embarrassed and shooting their arguments down and humiliating them. But the one thing they kept giving me was that, I hated God in my heart. That was why I was an atheist. And I was like, well, how can I hate him if I don't even think there's enough evidence to believe in him? And that really was the start of it, because it seemed like in every arena in life, we're very, very comfortable if someone is not using the same framework or ideology or worldview as us, that we're very quick to label them as evil. And that takes us to the most current arena, which is politics, where it blows my mind how there is more morality slinging in the political realm than any other place that I've ever seen, where it's like, oh, you support this political person, you're evil. Like you're a Nazi because you like this guy, or you're a commie because you like this guy. It's like the same thing that was going on in the world of atheism, but now it's just a different skin, and now it's political. And it seems to me that doesn't really serve us very well. It's actually just a divisive tool that goes back to our evolutionary tribalism, where we have a group of people all unified by a common set of values, and outside of that, no one cares. No one cares if the values are right and wrong. All they care about is, you're outside the tribe, so we're going to demonize you, and then we're going to attack, and then that's it. No one ever stops to be like, well, what if they're right? How do we know they're wrong? We just see things differently. And it just, the more I grow up, the more I see that we're so motivated by a need to feel right that we have just abandoned the process of trying to understand other viewpoints. And how is that going to serve us? We're going to be more isolated. Look at social media. The graphs of the political spectrum, before the internet got to be a really thing, there was a huge middle, which means, you had your fringe left, you had your fringe right, but there was a robust middle where people would mostly agree on the basics. And with the proliferation of the internet and social media, what we've seen is that graph, instead of having more of a bell curve distribution, now looks like a wave function, where you have a peak on one end and a trough in the middle and then a peak on the other end. And that represents the fact that we're like so polarized that the middle is almost gone. And I think that's because the internet has allowed us to quickly find people that we identify as being in our tribe. So there really isn't a need to go and understand what people, on the other side, why they believe what they believe, because we can surround ourselves with like-minded people and build echo chambers for ourselves. And so one of the things I used to do was go and engage in these political groups just to kind of map out people's minds and see why they believe what they believe. And there may be, 5% of the people in these groups who have this similar approach of like, well, let me understand why you disagree with me. And then maybe through that understanding, we'll come to some broader appreciation of the relative strengths and weaknesses of our positions. And we'll leave that encounter a better person than we were when it started. But 95% of people don't give a shit about that. All they care about is scoring their points, attacking the other side, and making sure that they say, I'm a good person, I'm a good guy, because I'm in my particular value system, and you're a bad guy because you're outside of my value system, and so I'm going to seek to just divide and belittle, and I'm going to disrespect anything you have to say because, well, you're a bad guy. A good example of that is this week I was talking to somebody, and the question was, do you still think Antifa are the good guys? Because there was a story that came out in Portland where like 5 people had been shot in a little Antifa meetup. There was an argument and one person was killed, and then the Antifa followers, they went and like hid all the evidence and didn't cooperate with the cops, and by all objective measures that was a bad thing. And it seems like there was a lot of that, and so I wanted to know what people thought about that. And I had an idea what they were going to say. But sure enough, as soon as you bring Antifa up, be prepared for someone to bring up Nazis, because that's like the psychological tool they use to kind of give their side the moral high ground. Is like, well, the other side's Nazis, so we have to be the good guys, which is a completely false disjunction. But hey, it's an easy thing for people to latch onto, so they like it. And so I got somebody saying that yeah, they were, because they're not as bad as Nazis. And so I just said, oh, okay, that's really weird that that's how you define it. But if we just look in the last 2 years, do you think that Nazis and the KKK have caused more destruction of property, killed more people, ruined more businesses, burned more buildings to the ground? Do you think they've done more than Antifa? And her response was, "Oh, what? So now you're defending Nazis?" And I was like, I don't recall ever defending Nazis. I mean, like, it seems like a bit of a stretch to go from talking about the facts of this one thing to now, well, then obviously I must be pro-Nazi if I'm being critical of Antifa. And like, it's like, why can't I just oppose all of them? And so it just struck me as very weird how the way people think about things is it's very emotional. It's really not this this intellectual exercise where it's like you have evidence, you have logic, you apply the logic to the evidence, and you get your conclusions. When I was younger, I used to think that's how all people believe stuff, is that everything was a function of the evidence and logic. And then as I got to know people as an adult, I was like, wow, that's totally wrong. People don't do that at all. They start with what they feel, and then they use logic to rationalize what they believe so that it looks good. And so when you talk to people about politics or whatever the hot button issue is, whether it's like evolution, the flat earth theory, those are all real fun, by the way. It's always the same thing where people just have this emotional attachment and they have to always reason back to it. So they start with so it's a big circular reasoning exercise. But yet everybody thinks they're reasonable. It kind of goes to those old adages where like, you find a woman and you ask her, hey, are other women crazy? And they say, oh yeah, women are crazy. But like, well, that's weird because like no woman would say I'm super crazy, but everybody else is crazy. But it's like statistically that's going to pose a problem, or the fact that like you ask any person, hey, are people dumb? Everybody's going to say, yeah, people are so stupid. Everybody's going to act like they're so much smarter than everybody else. But if you understand like the IQ distribution, that's not possible. I mean, the average person is going to have an IQ that's right in the middle of the distribution, which means that technically they're one of those dumb people, so it's just really interesting how much your self-concept is built on lies. And it's fascinating to me, the lies we tell each other to make ourselves feel good about our worldview. And it's tough though, because you end up feeling okay, so I'm past my first third, and this is excellent. It's got a really oily mouthfeel, which I wasn't expecting because the wrapper did not have a really oily appearance. But it's, I get what Chris was saying. This is really good. So, one of the things that I've been reading a lot about is the protests in Canada. And what I find so interesting is if you pay attention to what people say about it, tells you how they're thinking. It tells you how their mind is categorizing these things. And what's really amazing is that the vast majority of people, the rigor or the level of scrutiny that they apply to something is entirely dependent on what their emotional predisposition towards that thing is. What I mean by that is if there is something that I'm inclined to believe is true, then I'm going to be a lot less rigorous in vetting claims that I'm inclined to believe, because I'll feel good about it being true, so I'm just going to give it the pass. Yet, if it is a claim that I'm disinclined to believe, I'm going to subject it to the most stringent rigor before I accept it, because I don't want to believe it. And the Canada protest is a great example of that, because you've got the people who like the protest, and then you've got the people who don't like the protest, and the level of rigor that they use in analyzing it, it's really funny, because you've got, like, if you watch them over a long enough time, you see, okay, well, when you didn't like this statement, you were like freaking scientists, where you were like, giving no benefit of the doubt, and everything had to be proven. And then when it's something that you do like, it's just like, as soon as if it's consistent, you're like, that's proven. A really good example is Kyle Rittenhouse. That was a good one, because I saw a lot of people who, on the political left, they were very comfortable denouncing him a white supremacist. And when you ask them why, they said, well, he was photographed with the Proud Boys at a bar, flashing the OK symbol, which, according to Reddit, is a white power symbol and indicative of you are a member of the Nazi organization, whatever. And of course, if he were a white supremacist and member of the Proud Boys, then that would explain why he was taking a photo with them. But just because he took a photo with them doesn't mean he's in their organization. It just means he was in that bar. And so you have to look at everything and be like, well, I don't even know if that really compels that conclusion. But then you contrast that with the guy who drove his SUV into the parade in Waukesha, or Waukesha, whatever it's pronounced. And all those same people who were very, very comfortable ascribing all these racial motives to Kyle Rittenhouse based on evidence that was completely circumstantial and not compelling, they were entirely refusing to ascribe any racial motives to this other guy. And it's like, well, what is your standard for being able to say, I'm comfortable in saying that, we think this is a motive? And if the standard they applied in Rittenhouse was sufficient, then they would have had to think the same thing about this Waukesha guy, because he had a lot of stuff on his social media that was black nationalist, that was very sympathetic with the causes of BLM, and had some hostilities towards white people. But their reaction to him was, well, we don't know. We don't know. I mean, it could be, but we don't want to jump into any conclusions. And so it's just like really interesting how they have two standards, and it's like, well, if it's something that I'm comfortable with, I'm going to go with the user-friendly standard, which essentially just is a blessing. Like, yeah, that's good enough. And but people don't really attack them on those levels. They just call names. And so if you say, oh, you're an evil person because you use this standard on this one guy and then use an entirely different standard on this other guy, well, that's just stupid, because everybody does that. You just have to be aware of it. It doesn't make you an evil person. It means you're human and you are a bundle of emotions. You're not a cogitating machine that works devoid of emotion. So it's so interesting watching the back and forth where it's just a bunch of people indulging in the same errors, just going in different directions. And of course, as a result, it leaves me on a bit of an island, because it's only a matter of time before I piss off everybody, because I'm just like, that doesn't follow. And then they're all like, what are you, a Nazi? And they're like, oh, what are you, a commie? I mean, in the same discussion group, I've been called anarchists, commies, Nazis, everything, all because, like, at any given time, if I'm critical of a person's position, then they immediately just ascribe all these nefarious morality predicates to me, and now I'm just a deplorable person who obviously wants to eat babies and see the world end. And it's really interesting. So, getting to the middle of this thing, I'm at the fattest part of it, so I think the flavors are really coming nicely, and it has it's not as creamy sweet as like a Cuban cigar, but it has that sweetness of a Corojo, and the leather's really, really polished. It's got a really good rich flavor to it. And I would say more than anything, it's got a lovely balance of the highs and the lows. And so I would have no problem smoking a cigar like this again. I wish it was a little bit bigger. The Perfecto is a little bit of a smaller smoke, but I'm very excited to try the rest of them. I ended up getting all of them in the store just because they were there, and I have a bit of a problem that way. So I haven't really seen too many people smoking these Auroras, but very, very good. So this is the maiden trip of the Pensive puff. Basically just a kind of like a diary, just whatever pops into my mind, I just come out. I don't have anything prepared, no notes. I just was like, I'm going to get a damn good drink and a damn good cigar and see what happens. And I don't know. I will say it's a hell of a way to end the night. So I'm just going to keep on moving with it. And one thing I'm curious about is, how do you find that your childhood gave you your own set of challenges to get over? You know, I know that ever since I learned about trauma, it's kind of recast my life in a whole different light, because I understand now that, like, basically the human condition, the human story is you come out of your childhood a bundle of trauma, and you have to try to figure out what the fuck happened to you and undo them one by one so that you can become a whole self-actualized person. And what I see in my job is that most people are completely subservient to their trauma, and they never push back. They never say, you know what, this isn't okay. You know, one of the things that I see a lot are these posts from women who like to bitch about the dating situation and how men are so inadequate for them and not able to give them what they need. But nowhere in any of that can you find the idea of, I have to perfect myself. I know that I have some serious issues that are probably just as causative with why I'm single than the fact that every dude's a piece of shit, and I need to get those sorted out, And these women who are so vocal about how defective men are, they get really, really upset when you be like, well, you're actually the architect of your own suffering because you have these terrible behavior patterns you keep playing out. It's just, it's really funny how people don't really seem to be aware of that. I had a client today, and after the hearing, in my head, I'm like, you're crazy. This is all your fault. Like, you're impossible to co-parent with, and you make everything an issue, and it's like you're desperately trying to just get an advantage in a court case and just be an effective co-parent, and it's really easy to see through you. But she would never admit that because in her mind, she's the victim with everything, and nothing she ever does is wrong. And I'm like, wow, man, who'd have thought that, like, out of all the possible clients, I would have had the next incarnation of Jesus Christ? Who'd have thought it, But apparently, there are a lot of little Jesus Christ going around, and I represent all of them. How? What are the odds? What are the odds? It's rare when you get a person who's like, I trusted my own ability to make my life decisions, and it's gotten me nowhere. How about you steer me out of this? Teach me. What the hell do I do to fix my situation? Those clients are few and far between, but when you get them, they're a dream because they do what you tell them, and next thing you know, they've improved their situation, and their legal situation improves. Most people are like, hey, I have a horrible situation, and it's entirely the other guy's fault because I don't ever do anything wrong, and so we need to find a way to pin it all on him so that I get everything. And it's just like, that's never going to happen. And then they end up blaming me and saying all kind of horrible stuff, and that's just, I got to say, everybody owes it to themselves to really explore the outer fringe of humanity, because it'll shatter your myths that we believe about people. And I think the biggest takeaway that I've had in this journey is that I have so much appreciation for the ability of a person to deceive himself that I am utterly scared to death of anything that is convenient or comfortable for me, because that's how it starts, So like, I feel the need to just vet everything in my mind all the time, because it seems like being eternally vigilant against error is the only way to protect yourself from being one of those people that you see and you jeer at, and you're like, that person is a total waste. But in the abstract, they're just like us. They just have had less breaks than we have to be able to get where we are in life. But I mean, most people are just as screwed up as they are. So I find this this reverence for our own capacity to make error, it's sobering. And man, it exacts a toll. I keep kicking the cord, which shakes the camera. I'm sorry. But it's like, when you really see what the mind is capable of doing in brainwashing yourself, it's like you take baby steps. Everything that you're inclined to believe, you're like, well, how do I know? How do I know? Because this could be one of those things where I'm just totally kidding myself. And that's to me, that's like the biggest fear, is to wake up one day and realize that you're the villain in your own story, because everybody believes they're the good guy. I don't think you'll ever find a person who's like, yep, it's me, I'm the villain, and I deserve everything bad that's happening to me. I've represented villains and I've gone after villains in court. They never admit it. They're always like, nope, I'm squeaky clean, I'm good, everything I do is good. But just like with those other examples, it's not possible that everybody could be the good guy in life. There are clearly bad guys, you know. So how do you find a way to measure that that's objective to protect yourself, you know? My dad ended up leaving my mom for this lady out of Alabama, which I should have cued him that there was a mistake right there, but whatever. And right away, we were all grown ups at the time, so we were like, "Dad, this woman's no good, Dad. She's a a gold digging pathological liar." But other than that, she's great. And he kept saying, "Well, she pursues good as she understands it," and that was his justification for her. Not that she was a good person, but that she was trying to do good in her own mind. And I'm like, that's a really interesting way to frame it. Because normally we like to follow that old Judeo-Christian metric of you will know them by their fruits, right? So you can say all you want that you think you're a good person, but if you do objectively shitty stuff, most people will be like, you're bad. You're a bad person. You're not good. But if we reframe it and redefine it, so no longer is it objectively defined, but now it's defined by the mindset of, well, I'm trying to do good. Well, now there's no such thing as a bad person because everybody can say that they're trying to do good as they understand it. You know, the first thought I had when he told me that was like, well, shit, Pop, I'm pretty sure Hitler thought he was doing good when he was gassing all those Jews, but he wasn't. You know, you can't just say, well, he meant well. You know, he thought he was serving humanity in its own way. I'm sure Thanos thought that. I'm sure Ultron thought that. I mean, whatever villain you want to do who had aspirations of genocide, they all thought they were serving some higher good. But yet what they were doing was objectively terrible, you know? And that shift between defining things objectively versus subjectively, that's one of the biggest changes in our popular philosophy and the way we look at things. You know, one of the biggest things that I've noticed is that topics, terms that historically had objective definitions no longer have objective definitions. Now they're subjective. And it's really, really crazy. It's like the term for oppression, persecution, discrimination, all of these things, they used to be rooted in the objective. So if someone said, I have been the victim of blank, it was a pretty easy thing to test because all you had to do was go to all the surrounding relevant facts and apply them to the objective definition of the blank, and it's either going to meet that definition or it's not. And if it meets the definition, then that's right, you've been subjected to X. If it doesn't meet it, you have not. And beyond that, your attitude, the way you feel about it, the subjective is irrelevant. You know, it's a real easy way to do it. And when I was in graduate school, that's all we did because I was a topological algebraist. So it's a lot of syllables, but what that meant was I studied continuous functions on abstract number systems, which probably doesn't help anybody understand what the fuck I did. But basically, I had to prove conditions. And so it was like, if I want to prove that this number system has property X, I have to take the number system and use logic to show that with the axioms behind the system, it meets the objective definitions of X, and therefore it has property X. And the way I feel about the system, my attitudes, none of that has anything to do with whether or not it has that quality. And so you do that for a decade, and you just prove stuff that way. And then you get in the real world, and people use language that looks like what I was doing in grad school, where they're saying, you know, this thing is oppressive in whatever category, whether you're talking about feminism or social justice or whatever, and they make these declarations, and you're like, well, this is easy, right? Go to the definitions, apply it to the facts. It either meets it or it doesn't. There you go. And what you find is that there was a concerted effort culturally to not do that. That what I see from people is that they focus entirely on the subjective. And so if their experience feels like X, then they say, well, then it's X, and that's it. And it's like, that's a complete 180 from objective reality, you know? One example of that was what I saw back, maybe 10 years ago. Social justice was really getting popular, and there were all these stories about racism, and people would make these claims that a given thing was racist. And what I would expect to see in any discussion about that was, all right, you're saying this is racist. We have the definition. We have the facts. Let's apply the facts to the definition. It either is or it isn't. And if it's not, okay, you were mistaken. And if it is, then it's racist. And that was it. But the analysis that I watched people do was different. What they did was, if a person in this oppressed category says that their experience is of oppression, then that's it. That's what it is. And you're not allowed to judge it, because if you're not in that category of oppressed person, then your opinion doesn't matter. And from a formal perspective, that's nonsensical. It just doesn't work that way. You know, I know that I can say that, for instance, like, I'm really tall. I'm 6'5". I hit my head on stuff all the time. I actually shattered a light fixture in my own house with my face, and that was real kick in the ass there. Well, I could say that I think this house is prejudiced against tall people because I hit my face on a light fixture, and while it could certainly feel that way to me, that'd be a stupid thing for me to say, because to say that there's some sort of discrimination means that objectively there are these things that have to be the case. There has to be like this mental element of a discriminatory intent to say, look, we don't like tall people, so we're going to purposefully design this house in such a way that hopefully one of these tall motherfuckers smashes his face on something. And that, to me, just is so beyond the scope of the evidence that I would never even say such a thing. But I could, you know, I could. I'm also left-handed. I mean, I'm just I'm in all the little boxes. I could say that sporting goods stores are discriminating against me because they don't have as much left-handed accessible sporting goods than right-handers, and that's true. There isn't as much. I mean, there are a lot of stores that I've gone to, like a Costco, and they don't have anything for lefties, and I could say, yeah, this is it. They need to have as much stuff. We need to have equity. We need to have as much stuff for righties as we do for lefties. But if you understand, economics and the market and profits, and they have to cater to the most people at any given time. That's how you make money. You don't cater to the people who are going to give you a statistically insignificant portion of the market. So it's a no-brainer why a group that represents 10% of the population is going to have accessibility to things on a scale about 1/10 of what everybody else gets. Duh. But I could say that. I could still say, oh, that's prejudice against me, and they have a discriminatory intent. We should. This needs to be fixed. But how many places in life do we see that kind of garbage reasoning? The whole idea of Airplanes are discriminatory against bigger people because if you're over a certain size, you don't fit in the seat, so you got to buy 2 seats, and like this is sizist. And they say, no, it's not. It's economics. They understand why they're doing this stuff, and nobody is out there thinking we don't like this group, so we're going to purposefully engineer everything to make it just harder for them to get stuff. That's like, where in life have you ever seen something like that where people like, we're going to make these choices outside of any relevant consideration, financial, logistical, all that stuff. We're just going to be like, fuck those people. We're going to make this very difficult for them. That always struck me as just laughable. But that's now our society elevates the subjective to the point where you can say whatever you want and no one can argue otherwise. And what I see when that happens is it's just utterly divisive. And how are we ever supposed to try to take that graph where we have the polar sides, the extrema, how are we ever supposed to try to get them back into a middle when we've now abandoned all objective measures of reality in favor of the subjective, and we're saying if you do have a gripe, then it's bootstrapped into legitimacy without having to pass any objective criteria. That seems to me what you're going to end up with is a ton of insular fighting within these groups, and that's kind of what we see. It's just crazy. Well, it's getting a little bit late. This is winding down. I'll make some thoughts on this. The pairing was nice, but anyway, Weller, you could be sucking on a gym sock, and Weller would be like, "This is a great pairing." So I don't know how much to glean from that. But as far as this Corojo, absolutely would I smoke this again in a heartbeat. Someone were to offer me, damn straight. The only negative I have to say is that it's a little small for its price, but the quality is outstanding. It is a little bit difficult to keep lit if you're doing a lot of talking, so that's a downside. But we're troopers. But I would say that the burn line has been good. It's really smooth. It's really smooth. I think that for a Corojo, it's arguably the best Corojo I've ever had, and I've had a number of them. I don't know if I would rank it higher than Nesta Miranda just because the Nesta Miranda is less than half of the cost of this, and it's a bigger stick, but this is truly excellent. And I don't know if I would put this in the coveted 90 range, but it's close, real close. I'm gonna say 88, 89, which that's not it's not a chicken feed. That's a good score. So can't recommend these enough. This is a special occasion stick though. You really don't want to just be like chilling by yourself smoking one of these. You're gonna want this with somebody just because it's a special stick. So go get one of those. Hope you enjoyed the very first Gentleman the Scholar Pensive Puff. I'll do more of these as I have the time to just kind of pour my mind out in front of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, drop a comment, share the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Keep it smoky.